This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Otelia Edwards. Tonight's top stories. South Korea's opposition delays making a decision on impeaching acting President Han Duck-soo after he failed to approve a special investigation into Yoon Suk-yeol's actions. Pyongyang expected to send even more troops to help Russia, despite reportedly suffering large losses among its forces already deployed in Ukraine. The Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba expresses his intent to meet U.S. President-elect Donald Trump as soon as possible. His cabinet also ready to greenlight the next fiscal year's budget. And the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami 20 years on, how Indonesia's cutting-edge GPS-powered offshore early warning system is transforming disaster response. And the fate of Nippon Steel's bid to buy US Steel hangs in the balance. It's been referred to US President Joe Biden, who has to make that final call on whether the sale can proceed after the National Security Review Panel failed to reach a consensus. Also in East Asia tonight, China's economy may be slowing, but not everyone's on an austerity budget. We talked to one young woman who is spending hundreds of dollars a month on bubble tea. South Korea's opposition is holding back on making a decision to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo. It had earlier threatened to do so immediately when the interim leader refused to sign bills to investigate President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration and graft allegations involving his wife. Well, Han says bipartisan support is needed, but the opposition Democratic Party has accused him of stalling proceedings. And for more on this, we are joined now by CNA's Lim Yoon-suk, live from Seoul. First up, Yoon-suk, walk us through the impeachment process for the acting president, and how will this likely affect the current political crisis that's gripping South Korea?
Well, it's similar to the impeachment process for the president as we saw earlier this month. Now, the opposition party, like you said, had originally said it would submit this motion this evening, but then it reversed its decision, saying that the party will wait until December 26th to see what acting President Han Duck-soo does. And then, if needed, will submit this motion likely on the 26th and then hold a plenary session on the 27th. Now, the opposition party had demanded that President Han Duck-soo, acting President Han Duck-soo, take actions over three things. One was that special investigation into President Yoon's alleged insurrection charges, and also another investigation against his wife, the First Lady Kim Gon-hee. Now, those two were in a way rejected by acting President Han Duck-soo this morning when he urged political parties to work their differences in parliament instead of trying to get the government, him, to decide on that. Now, the third is appointing justices for the Constitutional Court, which is reviewing President Yoon's impeachment bill. Now, acting President Han didn't mention this today, and thus the opposition party says they will wait to hear what he has to say on that until 26th of December before deciding what to do next. Now, if the opposition party decides again that they want to impeach him, then lawmakers will have to take a vote. But right now, it's unsure whether they will need two-thirds, those 200 votes by lawmakers in the 300-member parliament like they did for President Yoon, or if they only need 150 votes, half of the 300-member parliament, like they do when they usually pass a bill. Because the law states that it's two-thirds for the president, but doesn't say anything for the acting president. And so the ruling and opposition parties right now are fighting over this, with the opposition parties saying only 150 is needed, which then means that they can pass this bill on their own, and the ruling party saying 200 votes are needed, which means that the ruling party members will also have to support this motion. So, it's unsure what is going to happen to this impeachment bill, but mixed reaction from South Korean public. Many of them say, yes, he should be impeached, and they're taking the opposition side. While there are also many South Koreans and the public in general who say that, acting President Han Duck-soo should just sort of be left alone to do his job so that he can try to bring stability and order to this country, especially with the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump taking office next month.
Yeah, still quite a fair bit of confusion going on regarding this. Well, meantime, Mr. Yoon has been defying summons, his lawyers saying that he's not likely to appear for questioning tomorrow. How do you think this defiance will affect the various cases against the impeached president?
Well, yes, definitely. It seems like he won't be appearing for questioning by the investigative team that's in charge, that's investigating this alleged insurrection charges. Now, his spokesman, Sok Dong-hyun, who's been a friend of President Yoon for about 40 years now, was quoted as saying that President Yoon is planning to focus on the impeachment proceedings at the Constitutional Court, and that President Yoon thinks that the Constitutional Court impeachment trial should go ahead first, should take priority over other investigations, says that, the other investigations can wait. And he was citing the case of former President Park Geun-hye, who only faced criminal investigations after the Constitutional Court decided to uphold her impeachment in 2017. And so, it's very likely that he will only be attending trials by the Constitutional Court and not the others, though, it's unsure if the other investigators are going to say, okay, you can do that, we'll agree to this, because now there are reports that they are trying to seek an arrest warrant for him if he does not appear for questioning. But right now, under the Korean law, it's very difficult to arrest a president, and he hasn't been impeached yet. And if the Constitutional Court does not uphold that motion, then he will be reinstated as president. And so lots of uncertainties as to what's going to happen here in South Korea.
Thanks so very much for that report. CNA's Lim Yun-suk, live from Seoul. North Korea has reportedly sent more than 10,000 troops to fight in Russia's war against Ukraine, but many among them have fallen. Seoul puts the number of those killed or wounded at more than 1,000, while Kyiv says it's exceeded 3,000. Still, Pyongyang appears to be preparing to send more soldiers to help Russia, according to South Korea's military. Lim Min-suk again with this report.
North Korea is believed to have about 1.3 million troops. It's one of the world's largest armed forces, and they have helped keep leader Kim Jong-un in power. Now their presence in Russia is reportedly bringing North Korea benefits, including much-needed cash and diplomatic leverage. The soldiers are some of North Korea's best-trained elite troops, but a large number have been reported killed or injured. A member of South Korea's Parliamentary Intelligence Committee, Lee Sung-kwon, spoke to reporters last Thursday after being briefed by the National Intelligence Agency, the NIS.
쾌활지라는 낯선 전장 환경에서 북한군이 전선 돌격대 역할로 소모되고 있다는 점과 또 드론 공격에 대한 대응 능력 부족 등이 배경이라고 설명을 하고 있습니다.
Despite those casualties, experts believe Kim Jong-un could be preparing to send more troops to Russia.
북한군은 최대 10만 명까지 파병할 수 있다라고 알려지고 있고요. 기본적으로 한 지역에 파병을 했다라는 것은 거기서 생기는 사상자로 인한 보충 병력까지도 감안을 한 것으로 봐야 합니다. 결국은 전투가 지속됨에 따라서 전력이 감소할 경우에는 해당 지역에 대한 추가 파병이 있을 수도 있게 되는 것이죠.
He said these issues could have been discussed when high-ranking officials from the two sides met earlier in October and November, as North Korea is hoping to gain much from the deployment.
러시아의 무기 수출뿐만 아니라 파병을 통해서 자신들의 경제적 난국을 돌파하고 또한 어떤 무기 체계 강화 그리고 무기 체계 관련 기술 이전 더 나아가서는 러시아와의 동맹 관계 강화 이런 것들을 노리는 것이라고 볼 수 있겠습니다.
Meanwhile, South Korea's military earlier this week said North Korea is preparing to also produce more suicide drones to be shipped to Russia. Lim Yun-suk, CNA, Seoul.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba says that he wants to meet U.S. President-elect Donald Trump while wrapping up an extraordinary diet session earlier today. Well, the leader also says that he is aiming to put together a budget for the next fiscal year, which should be ready for cabinet approval by the end of the week. For more, CNA's Michio Ishida joins us live from Tokyo. Michio, perhaps you could take us through some of the key points mentioned in the press conference?
Yes, well, political reform was an achievement of utmost importance for Mr. Shigeru Ishiba to regain public trust to politics following political fund scandal in his party. That's the cause for his Liberal Democratic Party losing a majority in the recent lower house election. And with pressure from opposition parties, he agreed to ban policy activity expenses distributed to parliamentarians for research and to form policies. And expenses for stationery used by parliamentarians not required to reveal until now will have to be disclosed, and details of expenditure will be accessible through a database. Now, what the LDP and opposition parties were not able to agree on is banning donations from companies. Mr. Ishiba said the decision will be made by the end of March. Also, Mr. Ishiba was able to pass a 13.94 trillion yen supplementary budget in his first diet session as prime minister. 5.75 trillion will go to support the economy, focusing on small, medium-sized enterprises' productivity and investment, subsidies for higher utility costs, and to secure a safe society for the public, which includes the recovery and reconstruction of the Noto Peninsula, reeling from the New Year's Day earthquake and summer floods, and improve the state of evacuation shelters. Now, what he did not mention is about easing income tax, which he has been under pressure from the third largest opposition party, Democratic Party for the People, as a condition to support LDP policies.
Well, Michio, it's not news that Prime Minister Ishiba, he's been suffering from low public approval rating. Do you think it's possible for him to turn things around?
Well, latest public opinion polls conducted by Japanese media show the Ishiba cabinet's approval rating lingers between 38 to 40%, and analysts here think it's stabilized. Well, Mr. Ishiba said during his press conference that it is up to the public to decide whether a trust has been recovered, but passing bills in diet is tough for him, unless there's a compromise with opposition parties, as his LDP, as I mentioned, does not hold a majority in parliament.
So, well, aside of trying to win approval from the people, he's also trying to make an impression on U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, whom he wants to meet as soon as possible. You think that's going to happen?
Well, during his press conference, Mr. Ishiba mentioned about Mrs. Akie Abe, the wife of the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, meeting Mr. and Mrs. Trump in Florida this month. Mr. Ishiba said that he was aware President-elect Trump's message indicating his willingness to meet with Mr. Ishiba. Now, the timing, Mr. Ishiba said, is quite difficult after the inauguration, as he himself has to deal with diet deliberation and pass the financial year 2025 budget. So an earlier meeting is ideal. So as speculated, perhaps in mid-January. Well, he said he wanted to confirm with Mr. Trump that they are on the same page regarding the security situation in Northeast Asia, given the severity of the state. Now, he also said that he desired to discuss the situation in Ukraine. But at this point, nothing is decided.
All right, thanks so very much for that report. Michio Ishida, live from Tokyo. A Japanese Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya is set to visit China tomorrow to meet with his counterpart Wang Yi. Mr. Iwaya says that he plans to hold frank discussions following up on an earlier meeting in November between leaders of both countries. The one-day trip would be the Japanese official's first to China since he became top diplomat earlier this year. Beijing said that it attaches great importance to the visit and that China is ready to work with Japan to strengthen dialogue, communication, and manage differences properly. Both countries are key trading partners, but ties have been frayed in recent years over issues including territorial sovereignty, military buildup, and the discharge of treated radioactive Fukushima wastewater into the sea, and what could be a sign of goodwill ahead of Mr. Iwaya's visit. The Chinese Foreign Ministry today suggested that Beijing could begin to adjust its import ban on Japanese seafood, even as it reiterates China's continued opposition to the Fukushima wastewater discharge. Hong Kong is offering bounties for 6 more pro-democracy campaigners deemed to have violated national security laws. Well, the amount is set at just under $129,000. The city's security secretary, Chris Tang, said that the 6 had engaged in alleged crimes of incitement to secession and subversion. They are also accused of collusion with foreign forces. All are based overseas in countries like the US, UK, and Canada. Well, the 6 include political commentator Chung Kim-hwa, former head of pro-independence group Tony Chung, and member of the Hong Kong Democracy Council, Carmen Lau. Mainland authorities said that they supported imposing the bounties on the 6 individuals as they had engaged in, quote, anti-China and destabilizing acts. There are now 19 opposition figures on the city's wanted list. Separately, authorities also revoked the passports of 7 activists who have fled Hong Kong. It comes as the city strives to revive its economy and reputation amid a years-long crackdown following anti-government protests in 2019. Authorities have defended the use of the national security law, saying that the rules have helped restore stability in Hong Kong. Well, time now for a breather, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Hong Kong derivatives trading volume hit a record high for a 3rd straight year, all thanks to the local bourse's efforts to expand its offerings. And consumer confidence in South Korea dips to its lowest since the COVID-19 pandemic. Hello again. Good to have your company on Christmas Eve. It is now time for a business update with Roland Lim. And Roland, we're all talking about the fate of Nippon Steel's bid to US Steel now. It seems like it's hanging in the balance.
Yes, and both sides are very eager to have it happen before the end of the year. US President Joe Biden has been referred to make the final decision on a national security review of Nippon Steel's acquisition of US Steel. This after the committee in charge of the evaluation was unable to come to a consensus before the Monday deadline. The White House has confirmed that the president received the evaluation from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Now, Nippon Steel and US Steel noted in statements that the panel could not reach a decision on the acquisition. Mr. Biden now has 15 days to decide on whether Nippon Steel will be allowed to buy US Steel. The US president has long indicated he will block the deal, but the White House has not flatly said he would. His successor, Donald Trump, has also publicly opposed the bid. But the timeline indicates that the matter will be resolved before he takes office. Now, Nippon Steel and US Steel have signaled that they plan to challenge any refusal in court. Both firms previously wanted to close the deal before the end of the year. In a statement released after the pair was notified of the panel's referral, Nippon Steel urged President Biden to reflect on the great lengths it has gone to address any national security risks and the commitments it has promised to grow US Steel. Now, US Steel also encouraged Mr. Biden to approve the transaction and stated that Nippon Steel's acquisition will clearly enhance America's national and economic security. It reiterated that the deal will help combat the competitive threat from China. Nippon Steel's $15 billion bid for US Steel was first announced back in December last year. It became a prominent matter during the US presidential election after the powerful United Steelworkers Union was against the deal. Now, US Steel has said that the deal was needed to keep its plants in Pennsylvania open and to remain competitive in the industry. Hong Kong's derivatives trading volume has reached another record high for the 3rd year running. More than 377 million futures and options changed hands in the year since January, according to Hong Kong's stock exchange. And that's a 14% increase from last year. The surge in trading volumes comes as stock volatility gauges in Chinese markets reach their highest level in more than 2 years back in October. Investor optimism and subsequent disappointment over policymakers' pledges to revitalize China's economy largely resulted in wild swings in Chinese markets this year. Analysts say it drove some traders to use derivatives as a way to bet on the markets in a cautious way. Hong Kong's bourse efforts to grow its market also helped to boost trading volumes on the exchange. It launched weekly options on the Hang Seng Tech Index in September, as well as on 10 single stocks, including HSBC, Tencent, and Alibaba in November. And within the first month of trade, they accounted for more than 10% of the total contracts volume for most of the companies. Observers expect the trend to continue into next year and anticipate the offering to expand into more securities. And just 4 days after being alarmed by the yen's excessive currency moves, Japan's finance minister has repeated his warning to the markets today. Now, he's hoping to jawbone speculators to stop selling and traders to start buying the yen as it languishes at multi-month lows. In Japan, it's rare for policymakers to explicitly describe the currency markets as alarming. Finance Minister Katsunobu Kato reiterating his warning that the government was deeply concerned about the currency's recent moves and that he'll take appropriate action when necessary, hinting at a potential intervention. The yen remains at a 5-month low, trading close to that 157 level and falling 5% alone this year. Or this month, I should say. That's no thanks to a slower growth rate in Japan as well as compared to the US and the disparity in longer-term interest rates between the two countries. With Central Bank Governor Kazuo Ueda set to deliver a speech tomorrow and the Bank of Japan releasing details of last week's meeting on Friday, there's a risk the yen could slide further against the dollar. But there's an upside to the yen's weakness. Now, Goldman Sachs believes that the current level of the yen will be a sweet spot to attract overseas investors to pick up Japanese stocks. The investment house sees only a limited risk to the currency weakening beyond that 160 level, given the likelihood this would trigger some form of intervention by Japanese authorities. South Korea's consumer confidence has dropped to its lowest level since the COVID-19 pandemic. The Consumer Sentiment Index fell to 88.4 in December, below the threshold of 100, which indicates public pessimism over the economy. The drop raises concerns about a further slowdown in private spending. Yesterday's data is the first indicator since the political crisis, showing that consumer confidence has been shaken. Days after Mr. Yoon's martial law bid, the benchmark Kospi plunged and the South Korean won hit its weakest level in 15 years earlier this month. There's increasing speculation that the Bank of Korea may consider a rate cut in January. The bank conducted back-to-back rate cuts in October and in November. And South Korean exports of bakery and related products reached a record high in 2024, and that's on the back of Korean cuisine and culture boom. In the month of November, overseas shipments of bakery products saw an all-time high of $440 million. That's up 8.3% from the same period last year. Now, snacks accounted for the largest share, some 70% of the total. Baked goods also recorded a massive surge, up about 19% on year, amid increased overseas interest in unique items such as steamed buns and fish-shaped pastries. The US was the largest importer of South Korean baked goods, followed by China and then Japan. And that is the latest in business. Okay.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, time now for another break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, our special series marking 20 years after the Indian Ocean tsunami. We look at Indonesia's new offshore early warning system, which uses GPS to monitor sea level changes. South Korea's opposition delays making a decision on impeaching acting President Han Duck-soo after he failed to approve a special investigation into Yoon Suk-yeol's actions. Pyongyang expected to send even more troops to help Russia, despite reportedly suffering large losses among its forces already deployed in Ukraine. And Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba expresses his intent to meet U.S. President-elect Donald Trump as soon as possible. His cabinet also ready to greenlight the next fiscal year's budget. Indonesia is developing a new offshore tsunami early warning system using GPS to monitor sea level changes. The country's National Disaster Mitigation Agency, or BNPB, says that the dynamic system could be implemented in the next 5 years. Saiful Bara Ismail looks at the critical role of such a disaster warning system in the second part of CNA's series commemorating 20 years after the Indian Ocean tsunami.
Simeulue is one of many picturesque islands in Indonesia's Aceh province. Behind the natural beauty lies a tragic story. In 1907, a strong earthquake triggered a tsunami, killing hundreds of its inhabitants. Nearly 100 years later, Simeulue was hit by a more devastating disaster. The Boxing Day earthquake and tsunami in 2004 ravaged the island, but fewer than 10 people were killed.
This tsunami monument greets visitors arriving in Simeulue from the nearby harbour. Residents here are proud about their tradition and they want to tell the world what they understand about tsunamis from past experience. Locals call it smong or giant waves, and it's this local wisdom passed down from generations that has helped save lives in Simeulue.
Karina was 15 years old when the 2004 tsunami wreaked havoc and panic in a village in Simeulue.
Ketika surut air, kami mau lihat karena ada ikan-ikan tuh di depan rumah, kebetulan memang laut. Terus nenek bilang, oh jangan ke sana, itu biasanya akan terjadi semong katanya, mau ada ombak besar. Kemudian kami diajak naik ke belakang rumah, itu ada gunung kebetulan. Naik ke belakang, pas naik air itu memang kelihatan langsung, itu ada 3 kali naik.
Rizwan is a cultural activist in Simeulue, and he said the local wisdom on tsunamis is an effective early warning system that helped minimize the death toll on the island. He actively passes down this tradition to the younger generation through poetry and songs.
Inang maso la semona Manok nom sao fano Uwila da sesewan.
Rizwan said a more concerted effort is needed to ensure the island's local wisdom is not forgotten.
Pemerintah harus membuat sebuah kebijakan agar local wisdom ini, kearifan lokal ini menjadi muatan lokal di sekolah secara formal.
While few people died in Simeulue during the 2004 tsunami, other parts of Aceh were not so lucky. More than 130,000 were killed, partly because of the lack of awareness of disaster mitigation. The 2004 tsunami led to the development of an early warning system that's essential to anticipate future disasters. It consists of a tsunameter anchored to the bottom of the seafloor and a surface buoy. If a large wave passes over the tsunameter, it will measure a higher pressure, indicating an increase in water level. The system transmits an alert to the buoy, which then passes the information to a satellite and onto the relevant authorities. If a tsunami is coming, alerts can then be sent out to the public, prompting an evacuation. Indonesia's National Disaster Mitigation Agency, or BNPB, said there are plans to improve the offshore tsunami early warning system.
If we discuss about the offshore equipment, it should be more distributed, because if we only have limited equipment, then usually it always at the wrong place at the wrong time. We are now currently assessing not a static equipment, but how to utilize the dynamic equipment. In example, how can we utilize the GPS available at the large vessel?
Schools conduct disaster drills to better prepare in the event an alert is triggered.
Drill tsunami ini sangat penting diberikan untuk siswa-siswi kita karena ini merupakan edukasi dan pembelajaran buat anak-anak kita biar mereka punya bekal untuk suatu saat jika mereka menghadapi kejadian yang seperti ini, yang realnya mereka sudah ada bekal, sudah ada ilmu, paling tidak bisa menyelamatkan diri sendiri.
At the regional level, cooperation and coordination of disaster management amongst ASEAN countries is done by the AHA Center. The center, which is based in Jakarta, said the region is now better prepared to handle a major disaster.
So 20 years on, we have moved far ahead in the regional and also collaboration with international organizations as well. Although we are one of the most disaster-prone region in the whole world, but in terms of capacity, in terms of resource mobilization capability, and the planning and contingency plan to respond to disaster, we are considered quite well developed.
The 2004 tsunami was a painful lesson for the Acehnese, but there's confidence that with greater awareness of disaster mitigation and improvements in early warning systems, they can better survive another similar tragedy in the future. Saiful Bahri Ismail, CNA, Simeulue, Indonesia.
Earlier, we spoke with Rajib Shaw, Professor of Media and Governance at Keio University, and he shared his views on the importance of sharing local knowledge when preparing for such disasters, as well as financing disaster planning.
I would like to focus on a major change which has been observed in the disaster governance, which is this localization and decentralization of the governance system. As we have seen that Aceh was far from Jakarta, Tamil Nadu in India was far from the national capital. So in this type of disaster events, I think the most important is how this local government and local communities are capable of responding to and the initially recover from the major disasters. And after these disasters, I think we had two major global frameworks. One is in the following years, in 2005, we called Hyogo Framework for Action. And then in 2015, that was the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And both these global framework focused very strongly on the importance of the local governance, the local community, the local culture, local coping mechanisms, and so on.
Okay, speaking of the localized the concept of things, as we heard from our correspondent just now in his report, indigenous knowledge and local wisdom have long played a crucial role in disaster resilience. What are the best ways for integrating these traditional knowledge with modern scientific approaches to create more effective disaster management strategies?
It's a very, very important thing. Like when we have the indigenous knowledge, there are some of these indigenous knowledge are documented, but some of these are not documented. These are orally transmitted. So we call some of them are very formal indigenous knowledge, which has been practiced, which you can possibly see, maybe some building materials, the building structures. But some of these are also with the folk songs or sometimes with the traditional cultural issues or cultural events and so on. But for indigenous knowledge, I think the documenting the local indigenous knowledge and linking it with the local education system is extremely, extremely important.
Okay, and Professor, while substantial progress has been made, are there areas where you feel progress has been disappointingly slow?
One of the major challenge is the financing issue. We always say that if you spend $1 now, that saves $7 for the recovery process. That means that it shows the importance of the prevention. Many times we see that there has been huge investment after the disasters. Major banks, the national government, the non-government organizations, many different stakeholders, and also the common citizen actually with their voluntary donations. So there have been huge amount of money usually comes after the disasters. But one of the major challenges is how we do more risk-sensitive investment. So, like when we talk about the disaster planning, or preparedness, sometimes these are very, very invisible things.
Well, the Singapore Red Cross credits its response to the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami as a pivotal learning experience, shaping its approach to disaster relief to this day. Now, a key commitment is rapid deployment, aiming to be on the ground within 48 to 72 hours of a crisis. And to ensure swift action, it has also established pre-allocated funds for immediate resource deployment. Alif Amshah with the report.
Lives were shattered as nature's wrath descended upon coastal cities across the region, leaving behind an unparalleled trail of death and devastation. In a race against time, the Singapore Red Cross sprang into action, deploying teams to Indonesia and Sri Lanka with precision and effort that required seamless coordination.
The immediate response is important in terms of relief items. The immediate relief, trying to see whether we can provide essentials, water, food, shelter. Subsequent to it, we also have to decide what are the immediate needs on the ground beyond the basic necessities.
Back home, an army of volunteers was mobilized to manage the overwhelming flow of donations pouring in, working tirelessly to sort, pack, and ensure the aid reached those in desperate need.
$86 million that was collected did not come from a small number of big donors. It came from a huge number, some giving $5, $10, mothers on the way to market stopping by to donate $10, things like that.
As the initial chaos began to subside, a sobering realization set in. Relief efforts would not be a matter of days or weeks, but could stretch on for months.
The relief effort will see a huge number of organizations transcending on the site. But within 3 weeks to maybe 5 weeks, everybody will leave. And then the big job starts. So we realized that the rebuilding and rehabilitation efforts are as important, if not more important.
This volunteer grasped the profound importance of the mission, dedicating nearly a year in Indonesia to extend a helping hand.
Once in a while you do find a dead body and then you get the smell will kill you. But on the other hand, life goes on as well, yeah. But and there's so much to rebuild, not just the building but people's life.
The Singapore Red Cross says the lessons learned during those efforts profoundly influenced how they carried out future missions, including its swift and coordinated response to Japan's devastating tsunami in 2011.
Early on, we realized that we have to work with other organizations in order to be able to make sure that the funds we raise are used most efficiently. So we didn't get caught in this mindset that we have to work with the Red Cross, Red Crescent partners only. So we work very closely with the governments. We always kept our partners informed of who we are working with. But because of that, we managed to do some major projects in Japan.
And that approach proved pivotal for the Singapore Red Cross in 2015, following a devastating earthquake in Nepal. Collaborating with numerous partners, it raised some $13 million, and those contributions became a beacon of hope. Not only did they fund over 40 rebuilding projects, but they also played a key role in restoring the spirit of the people.
Well, if you didn't get enough of the tsunami stories, for more insights, you can catch CNA's 4-part documentary on the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, The Waves That Changed Us, on CNA Insider's YouTube channel. Now, our week-long special coverage also continues here. Tomorrow, we will be looking at the disaster's impact on Sri Lanka's coastline and the problems with reconstruction. Well, coming up on East Asia tonight, South Korea officially becomes a super-aged society with 20% of its population made up of people 65 or older. South Korea has joined the ranks of a super-aged society. According to official data, 20% of its population is made up of those aged 65 or older, or more than 10 million of its 51.2 million registered population. So this puts the country alongside other super-aged societies like Japan, Germany, and France. Men account for 44% of those aged 65 and above. Well, the gloomy trend's driven by a birth rate that's the lowest in the world. The country, which is the world's fourth largest, saw just 0.7 births per woman a year ago. And that's far below the 2.1 are required to sustain the current population. Billions of dollars spent to encourage more births have so far failed to deliver. High costs, soaring property prices, and an ultra-competitive society are often cited as reasons. South Korea's population is estimated to fall to 39 million by the mid-2060s. By then, the median population age will be 62. We turn to North Korea, where a fashion extravaganza is taking place in the heart of Pyongyang. Winter jackets and outerwear from, they're among the tens of thousands of clothing items on display at this year's garment exhibition. State media KCNA says that the event features more than 200 exhibitors.
전시장을 돌아봤는데 가죽 커트가 여자 가죽 커트가 작년에 비해서 아주 많이 세련되지고 마음에 들었습니다.
Exhibitors say they are showcasing more clothing in styles and colors that will suit people's preferences across all age groups. And it's not just the latest fashion on display. Training opportunities are also offered on site for those in garment production.
사회주의 문명국이 제모에 맞게 우리 시국이 거상하면서도 독특한 옷차림 문화를 적극 창조하고 계속 발전시켜 나가는 데서 큰 우위가 있으리라고 봅니다.
China's economy might be slowing down, but its young people say there's always time for bubble tea. A CNA's Money Mind meets a young woman from Shanghai who spends hundreds of dollars a month on the sweet treat.
There's a reason why Shanghai resident Dong Xiaodai spends $700 a month on milk tea. She loves it so much, she once traveled over 1,000 kilometers just to try out a new brand of the drink.
不只是喝奶茶，但是喝奶茶是非常重要的一个目的，让我们选择去长沙这个城市玩。想喝茶颜悦色茶没有怎么办？走，买张高铁票，我们坐车过去，就是为了喝一杯奶茶。那来都来了，我也不能只喝一杯吧，可能就是2杯、3杯，就是一定要喝回本的那种。
But behind the hype, milk tea gives some young Chinese a reason to socialize and enjoy an affordable treat. Originally a mix of tea and creamer or milk with tapioca pearls, it's now a catch-all term for modern types of tea drinks that come with or without milk. These new style teas have hit a sweet spot, especially with young workers in China.
有时候可能在我忙碌了一天之后，或者是连续几天的加班之后，我点一杯奶茶，我犒劳我自己，对我来说就是感觉可能前2天那些疲惫就会瞬间消除。
For Taika, as she's commonly known, milk tea is an affordable luxury. The 28-year-old works long hours and late nights as the owner of a role-playing game studio in Shanghai. The studio stages 剧本杀, a murder mystery role-playing game that's popular among Chinese youth. In good times, Taika earns up to 30,000 renminbi or over $4,000 a month. With rent and labor costs, she can lose the same amount when things aren't going well. But milk tea remains an accessible and go-to beverage. She can drink up to 3 cups a day. She also buys rounds for her friends, pushing her monthly bill to $700.
因为呢，这最近几年呢，确实整个经济状况都不是很好，然后我自己的店呢也受到了很多影响，包括我身边很多年轻人也是这样，他们失业率很高，要么就是手上没钱， 就算有钱呢，也不敢随便乱花。但是奶茶呢，因为它价格相对比较低廉，那是我们还是相对可以负担得起的。
But even here, there are opportunities to splurge. Taika's single most expensive cup of milk tea has cost her 500 renminbi, or around $70. A sum that would have been unimaginable when her love affair with the drink started over 2 decades ago.
大概是从7、8岁，就小学1年级开始喝奶茶。那到读书之后，就可能自己有上学放学的机会，那就学校门口对面那种小卖部，他会拿出各色各样的罐子。如果说奶茶可能有点太具他了，它可能就是一杯叫什么添加剂冲制的调和复合型饮品。但是小时候对我们来说，可能那个是世界上最好喝的东西。那个时候可能一杯奶茶1块、2块，你可能加个珍珠是2块钱或者2块5毛钱。
For a lot of people, it still can bring you back to like a little bit of a sense of childhood feeling. Because after school, you'd have a milk tea. So you get into work and you have the same thing with milk tea. Maybe I have 996. But if I can make it a little bit better with milk tea, it's a small price to pay for making the whole situation a lot more comfortable.
China's economy might be slowing down, but young consumers are still willing to splash their cash on what they see as small yet essential luxuries.
现在年轻人其实比以前，可能比我的长辈们更加要理智谨慎一些，他不会被一些消费陷阱所欺骗，不会无脑去买一些很贵的东西。
At Taika's role-playing game studio, one round lasts 6 to 8 hours and costs 200 to 400 renminbi, or $28 to $56 per person. For a fraction of that price, milk tea provides an additional layer of enjoyment.
很多时间，它可以用20块、30块去解决我可能7、8个小时的快乐。我们会不会到了？可以想吧？好，我先上啦。这边也是吧？经常买的，大概1周1到2个不等。对，然后打的时候。然后也通常都会点一点，然后基本上都是我们先说我想喝奶茶，然后我给他这样子。
There are now over 500,000 milk tea shops in China. The value of the market reached 193 billion renminbi last year. It's expected to approach 250 billion renminbi by the end of next year. Taika is typical of the new Chinese tea consumer, female and under 40. She says milk tea is more than just a drink. It's social currency, and one that is cheaper than the available alternatives.
如果没有奶茶的话，我怎么和我朋友增进感情啊？大概几种吧，就是第一个就是请吃饭。 那可能出去吃一次饭，大家聚一次餐，大概在千把块钱左右。所以其实如果没有奶茶的话，我应该会花不少钱在这个上面。然后当中如果穿插着点奶茶的话，其实奶茶真的是一个很省钱的社交方式。从吸管戳下去的那一刹那，到你把它喝完丢进垃圾桶的那个时间段里面，是能够感受到自己的快乐程度是在 不断的往上攀升的。对我本人而言，就是我一直觉得奶茶是一个最低成本的多巴胺来源，也就是我能够从它身上用最低的价格去获取的。
Well, you can catch this and other Money Mind episodes on CNA.Asia, MeWatch, and YouTube. And that wraps up East Asia Tonight for 2024. We'll see you next year. In the meantime, you can get your headlines anytime at CNA.Asia, and we're also on Facebook and on YouTube. Have a merry one. Good night.